I'm not sure exactly what we're all doing here because most of everyone who is here is pretty well already committed to this idea of independence. It kind of reminds me of some of the, I wasn't around back in those days, but I hear about the gatherings of people before Revolution. And before the American Revolution, there were a lot of backroom meetings and people who shared some similar ideas and similar aspects of how they were going to get back at the system, so to speak. Well, that's what we're up against now. We have a system. The American healthcare system is broken. Everybody talks about it, but it's not broken for the insurance companies, as we've all been led to hear today. And there are a lot of people who are benefiting dramatically from the healthcare system. The people who aren't benefiting are us. And yet they don't have a system if they don't have us. And therein lies the problem. And I'm going to get to that in just a minute. I'm actually going to keep my remarks fairly brief. I've written a blog for a number of years called spiritofhealthcare.com, and one of the more recent pieces out of that is included in your handout. It's called Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Practice Happiness. And the reason for that title is because that's really what we should be aspiring to do. There's another blog post that's not in your handout or anything, but I wrote it several years ago that used an analogy of a movie. That movie called War Games. I don't know whether you remember watching it, but it was Ali Sheedy and Matthew Broderick, where this big computer, Whopper was the name of the computer, that was running all these military simulations of possible thermonuclear war and the various different scenarios that might lead to thermonuclear war. And it's a very complicated story, but in the end, the computer seizes control of everything. And the computer is ready to launch what it assumes is a retaliatory response against the Russians, when in fact it's actually a first strike. But it doesn't know that. And ultimately, they get the computer to play tic-tac-toe against itself, and it realizes there's no way to win, so then it goes through all the various simulations very quickly and realizes, after all mutual self-destruction has occurred, the computer screen goes blank, and there's this little blinking cursor at the top, and then it types out and speaks the word, "Strange game. The only winning move is not to play." That is what we are talking about here. This is a room full of pretty bright people, and we all somehow or another think we can figure this out, that we just work this way and that way and we can find a way to win instead of being on the losing side. But the reality is that the game is rigged against us. We can't win a game where someone else is controlling all the rules. About 12 years ago, a little over 12 years ago now, I opted out of every managed care contract all at one time. The stupidest thing I ever did, okay? Because I nearly went broke as a result of it. If it weren't for the fact that primary care physicians and internists and many of my other colleagues referred themselves and their families to me, but they wouldn't refer their regular patients to me because I was out of network, I probably would not be standing here today talking about this. I'd be, doing something else, maybe raising some cows with my son up in North Texas. But the point is I would recommend anybody who's in the specialty organization that is reliant on relatively large payments for relatively small number of procedures compared to primary care, that you don't just opt out of everything all at once. Find the ones that are the most egregious, that pay you the least, or that are the biggest hassle to have to deal with, and opt out of those. And then take the next one and go a little bit at a time. But I can't emphasize enough how important it is to find yourself a niche, to find yourself some mechanism where you stand out in the crowd, because there's other people that are going to do what you're doing, and they'll do it for whatever the insurance company will pay. And so you have to differentiate based on something other than just, hey, me too, I'm still here, sort of thing. But when I opted out all these managed care contracts, I was sitting around in my office one day and I didn't really have a whole lot to do. So I was going through some remodeling process, and I pulled out a framed piece that was sitting in a box in the back of behind my desk, and it was the fellowship pledge of the American College of Surgeons that I had hanging on my wall at one time and taken it down, and for whatever reason didn't pay much attention to it. I got to reading it. Now, the American College of Surgeons, and in fact, I'm just really pleased to actually stand before you today and say I'm a governor of the American College of Surgeons. As the immediate past president of the American Society of General Surgeons, I was elected that by my organization, and I take great pride in that because that organization's been around 101 years. And it stood on some very strong ethical principles upon its founding. In fact, in 1913, when the American College was founded, the group that got together, much like this organization here of old surgeons, said, you know, we need something that is going to set us aside from everyone else. We need something that is going to emphasize our ethics. And so the third paragraph of that pledge actually deals with a major issue at that time. In the era of the early 20th century, it was not uncommon that primary care physicians, although they just called them docs at that time, they didn't have the same lexicon that we do today, but they would refer a patient for a surgical procedure and expect a kickback. Mm-hmm. They would expect a financial finder's fee, if you will. It was called fee splitting. And the expectation was that the surgeon would split their fee back with the referring doctor. And the college came out and said, this is wrong. This is morally and ethically inappropriate. And it's going to lead to higher costs, and it's going to lead to inappropriate procedures. So the third paragraph of the fellowship pledge says, upon my honor, I hereby declare I will not practice fee splitting. Pretty simple, okay? So every college, every fellow of the college takes that oath, or at least is supposed to have. They've changed it a little bit over the years to kind of soften that language a little bit because everybody says, well, we don't really have fee splitting as a problem anymore. But I'm going to contend to you that it is exactly the problem that we have. Right now, today, when you sign a contract with an insurance company, you are in essence saying, I will accept whatever percentage of my fee that you deem appropriate in exchange for the opportunity to receive a referral that has your name on it. So the ethics problem was there then, and I believe it is there today. There's a new website started by a friend of mine. I'm sure many of you know Chris Held. She's a ophthalmologist in San Antonio, and she and a couple of other folks have put together a website called Rebel.md. Brand new, and she asked me the other day if I would be willing to write a little piece for it. And I thought to myself, I said, well, this is exactly what I'm going to be going to Minnesota to talk about, and that is the ethics of independent practice. So I'm going to take a minute and just read to you what is there, and you can find it yourself. And then I'm going to let my distinguished colleagues up here tell you all about how to go about getting out of third-party payment. I've done so. I'm out of Medicare and so forth, happy as a clam, because I get to spend time with each and every patient now. That wasn't the case when I was on more or less a time clock from my office manager. Anyway, and this is about another movie too, so I'm kind of a movie buff. In 1955, the iconic movie of the day, Rebel Without a Cause, starring James Dean and Natalie Wood, was released by Warner Brothers and immediately became a box office hit. The story was one of defiant teenagers and their struggles with social chaos of high school. It was clear from the opening scenes that the parents of these highly impressionable young people seemed either unable or unwilling to love and guide their children through these troubled times, and the results were predictably disastrous. The moral of this classic story is implied by the title. There's nothing wrong with a rebellious spirit, provided it is properly directed and serves a higher purpose. There must be a cause to be defended or a wrong to be righted. The rebel must have an overarching goal, or all the expended energy serves no real purpose. The same can be said today regarding the outrage, anger, and frustration that's being displayed by many of America's physicians in response to what is obviously a systematic assault on the independent practice of medicine. But unlike teenagers, doctors can't expect parental guidance. Even if it were offered by the sages among us, our collective inability to agree on much of anything would render such advice just another topic for contentious debate. There is one thing upon which we can and should all be in agreement, and that is how incredibly hard we worked to achieve the once lofty status of physician. The rite of passage through medical school and residency is an arduous one, and throughout modern history it has been accompanied by respect from virtually all quarters, that is, until recently. Doctors today are seen more as interchangeable parts in a massive healthcare machine run by a convoluted system of payers. If one healthcare provider, i.e. physician, fails to do the bidding of the machine operators, they are simply replaced by someone who is more compliant, more manageable, or more employable. Naturally, many physicians are unhappy with this public downgrade and are looking for ways to fight back. They rebel against the injustice of a system that demeans their humanitarian activities in favor of profit and power. Thus far, the rebel fight has had little impact and is yet to be joined by sufficient numbers to alter the actions of the massive bureaucracies that control the finances and thereby make the rules. Physician rebels need a cause to unite us, something to provide direction for our counterattack, something upon which everyone can agree, something we all have in common, whether a new primary care resident or a seasoned neurosurgeon, a radiologist reading films remotely from home, or the ER doc in the pit that ordered them at 3 a.m. The one thing that we all share is our profession, and it is that profession that has come under siege from all directions. We are being marginalized, and it is time for every physician to recognize that what we do is not a job. Our talents and intellects have been purposefully channeled through years of individual hard work and sacrifice, and each of us has justifiably obtained the title medical doctor. No one can take that away. Not a hospital administrator, not an insurance executive, not a government bureaucrat, not even a specialty board, unless we allow them to do so. We are sworn as physicians not only to our patients, but also to each other, as brothers and sisters cut from the same cloth. It is my opinion that all physicians have a moral obligation to themselves and their colleagues, past, present, and future, to protect and defend our profession from anyone who would seek to control, dominate, subjugate, or enslave any of us. Our professional ethics, which have stood the test of time for 2.5 millennia, must not be subjected to outside interpretation or arbitrary revision. They belong to us, and it is up to us to protect and defend them. I've often heard the question asked by colleagues in doctors' lounges, who's going to take care of us in our hour of need? There can only be one acceptable answer: a physician. The next group of American doctors will be inspired by the same calling that has drawn countless generations of compassionate individuals into this profession, but only if we successfully defend that profession today. Now is the time to stand together, united as physicians, men and women willing to fight against the myriad forces of control, offering our collective efforts as true rebels with a cause. And with that, I will conclude my remarks.